Supreme Commander Vrak Tol flexed his 4 massive claws against the polished obsidian surface of his command throne. His species, the mighty Korvash Empire, had conquered 17 star systems in the past century. They were apex predators, standing 9 feet tall with razor-sharp talons and hide thick enough to deflect plasma bolts. Yet here he sat, reviewing yet another failure report from the hunting grounds of Zelthara Prime. Another species eliminated. His voice carried the bitter taste of disappointment as he addressed his tactical advisor, Sub-Commander Jex 9. The Trilaxian hunting party lasted exactly 47 minutes before the maze claimed them all. Jex 9's scaled head bobbed nervously. "My lord, perhaps we should consider that the maze has become too effective?" Vrak Tol's yellow eyes blazed with fury. "Too effective? Sub-Commander, we designed the perfect hunting ground. A labyrinth spanning 300 square kilometers of the most dangerous terrain in known space. Predatory flora that can dissolve bone in seconds, gravitational anomalies that crush bodies into paste, and environmental hazards that would make a neutron star seem hospitable." The Supreme Commander rose from his throne, his massive frame casting shadows across the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Fang. Through the viewport, the jungle planet of Zelthara Prime rotated slowly, its surface a swirling mass of green and brown that concealed the deadliest maze ever constructed. "We've tested it on 43 different species over the past 2 years, Vrak Tol continued, his voice rising. "The Zarathi warriors, known for their tactical brilliance, dead in 3 hours. The Molten Collective, beings made of living lava, extinguished in 90 minutes. Even the Void Stalkers, who hunt in the space between dimensions, couldn't survive a single day." Jex 9's throat sac inflated nervously. "Perhaps, my lord, we should consider the possibility that no species can successfully navigate the maze." "Nonsense!" Vrak Tol slammed his claw against the armrest, leaving deep gouges in the metal. "There must be beings worthy of our hunt. We didn't conquer half the galaxy just to build an elaborate execution chamber." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. The Korvash had always prided themselves on being the ultimate predators. Their society was built on the concept of the Great Hunt, the belief that true strength could only be measured by stalking and defeating worthy prey. But lately, finding worthy prey had become increasingly difficult. A soft chime interrupted Vrak Tol's brooding. Communications Officer Thex Prime approached with obvious reluctance. "Supreme Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the Trade Guild. They claim to have information about a species that might interest us. Another overhyped warrior race that will disappoint us within hours?" Vrak Tol's tone dripped with sarcasm. "Let me guess. They're descended from apex predators, have natural weapons, and possess ancient warrior traditions." "Actually, my lord," Thex Prime hesitated, "they claim this species has no natural weapons, relatively weak physical capabilities, and comes from a planet they classify as mundane." The bridge crew exchanged glances. This was unexpected. "They're called humans, my lord. The guild representative says they've been observing them for several months and believes they possess certain adaptive qualities that might prove interesting." Vrak Tol's laugh was like grinding stone. "Humans? What kind of ridiculous name is that? And they have no natural weapons? No armor plating? No energy manipulation abilities?" "None, my lord. Apparently they're bipedal mammals with soft skin and blunt teeth. Their home planet has gravity slightly less than standard, and they require a specific atmospheric mixture to survive." "This is insulting!" Vrak Tol roared. The Trade Guild wants us to hunt? Pets? What's next? Shall we stalk houseplants through the maze? But something nagged at the back of his mind. In all his years as a hunter, the prey that seemed least dangerous often proved the most surprising. Still, humans sounded pathetically weak. However, Thex Prime continued carefully, the Guild mentions that humans have spread to over 200 worlds, despite having no faster-than-light travel technology until recently. They've survived ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, and something called wars, where they fight their own species. They fight themselves? Jex9 looked puzzled. What kind of evolutionary advantage does that provide? Perhaps it keeps them sharp, Fractol mused, though I doubt it matters. How long did the Guild estimate a human would survive in our maze? They refused to make a prediction, my lord. Now that was interesting. The Trade Guild had been tracking the maze experiments since the beginning. They'd accurately predicted the survival times of the last 12 species within minutes. Their refusal to estimate meant they genuinely didn't know. Fine, Fractol decided. Contact the Guild. Tell them we'll accept delivery of one human specimen. But I want it to be their best representative, not some weak civilian. Understood, my lord. Any specific requirements? Someone who knows how to hunt. If we're going to be disappointed again, at least let's be disappointed by someone who understands the concept of predation. 3 days later, the cargo transport vessel Profitable Exchange docked with the Eternal Fang. Vractol watched through the security feeds as a single cylindrical stasis pod was transferred to their containment bay. The Guild's representative, a reptilian Seth named Merchant Clixtal, accompanied the delivery personally. Supreme Commander, Clixtal's forked tongue flicked nervously as he spoke. I must emphasize that this human is unusual, even by her species' standards. Her? Fractol's head tilted. This specimen is female. Yes, my lord. Among humans, gender doesn't determine combat capability as it does with many species. This particular individual has extensive experience in what humans call survival hunting in environments they consider hostile. Fractol examined the stasis readings. The human measured only 1.7 meters in height and weighed barely 70 kilograms. By Korvash standards, she was smaller than their younglings. What's her designation? She calls herself Riley Martinez. According to our intelligence, she's spent the past 15 years hunting dangerous prey in the wilderness regions of her homeworld, and several colonies. Dangerous by human standards, you mean? Fractol's amusement was evident. What could possibly be dangerous to a species that has no natural predators? Actually, my lord, humans evolved alongside numerous predator species. Their homeworld contains creatures they call bears, tigers, crocodiles, and sharks. While these might not threaten a Korvash warrior, they've killed thousands of humans throughout history. The Supreme Commander studied the readouts more carefully. The human's muscle density was surprisingly high for such a small frame, and her reflexes tested at the upper limits of mammalian capability. Still, she looked incredibly fragile. Her brain activity is unusual, Jex9 noted, reviewing the neural scans. Very high activity in regions associated with pattern recognition and spatial reasoning. All prey species develop enhanced pattern recognition, Vractol dismissed. It's how they avoid being eaten. Wake her up. I want to observe this Riley Martinez before we begin the hunt. The stasis pod hissed open, and the human slowly regained consciousness. She sat up carefully, her brown eyes taking in the surroundings with remarkable calm for someone who'd just awakened on an alien warship. Vractol activated the translation matrix and spoke into the comm system. "Human Riley Martinez, you are aboard a Korvash vessel. Do you understand what is happening to you?" Riley looked directly at the security camera with an expression Vractol couldn't quite interpret. "Let me guess," she said, in a voice that carried no fear whatsoever. "You're some kind of galactic big game hunters, and I'm about to become your latest trophy." The bridge crew exchanged surprised glances. Most species either cowered in terror or raged helplessly when they realized their situation. This human sounded almost bored. "Your species has a reputation for adaptability," Vractol replied. "We wish to test this reputation." "Uh-huh." Riley stood up and began examining the containment cell with professional interest. "So, what's the setup? Gladiator arena? Hunting preserve? Some kind of puzzle maze designed to kill me in creative ways?" The accuracy of her guess was unsettling. "You will be placed in our great maze on the surface of Zelthara Prime. You will have standard survival equipment and 72 hours to reach the exit. If you succeed, you will be granted freedom and safe passage home. And if I don't succeed, I die horribly while you watch for entertainment." Riley nodded, as if this was perfectly reasonable. "Got it. Question: what's your success rate so far?" Vractol hesitated. No prey had ever asked that question before. Success rate? "How many species have actually made it through your maze? Because, if the answer is 0, that suggests either the maze is impossible, or you haven't been testing the right species." The human's casual analysis of their hunting ground, as if it were a technical problem rather than a death trap, was genuinely disturbing. Prey wasn't supposed to think like this. "No species has yet succeeded," Jex9 answered before Vractol could stop him. "Interesting." Riley sat down on the cell's bench and appeared to be thinking. "So either you built a maze that's actually impossible to solve, which would make you pretty terrible game designers, or every species you've tested has been approaching the problem wrong." "Terrible game designers?" Vractol's voice was dangerously low. "Think about it from a design perspective," Riley continued, apparently oblivious to how close she was to being vaporized. "If literally no one can win your game, then it's not really a game, is it? It's just an elaborate execution method. Where's the sport in that?" The bridge fell completely silent. In her first 10 minutes conscious, this human had managed to insult their greatest achievement and question their competence as hunters. "However," Riley added thoughtfully, "if the maze actually is solvable, and 43 species failed to solve it, that suggests they were all approaching it the same way, which means there's a solution that requires a fundamentally different approach." Vractol found himself genuinely curious despite his anger. "And what approach would that be?" Riley looked directly at the camera again, and this time her smile was distinctly predatory. "Well, that depends on whether you built a maze to kill predators, or a maze to kill prey." "Explain." "Every species you've tested so far were apex predators on their homeworlds, right? Big, strong, fast, armed with natural weapons, used to being at the top of the food chain?" "Correct." "Then they all made the same mistake. They approached your maze like predators. They tried to fight their way through, overpower the obstacles, and dominate the environment." Riley's grin widened. "But what if your maze was designed to kill that specific mindset? What if the only way to survive is to think like prey?" The implications of her words sent a chill through the bridge crew. If this small, weaponless human had identified the fundamental flaw in their greatest achievement within minutes of awakening. "Humans aren't apex predators," Riley continued. "We're persistence hunters, and opportunistic omnivores. We survived on Earth not by being the biggest or strongest, but by being the most adaptable. We learned to use tools, work in groups, and most importantly, we learned how to run away from things that could kill us. She stood up and began pacing the small cell. Your maze probably has dozens of ways to kill anything that tries to fight it head-on. But I'm betting it has blind spots. Design flaws that assume the prey will behave like a predator. Vrak was beginning to understand why the Trade Guild had refused to predict this human's survival time. She wasn't approaching the problem like prey or predator. She was approaching it like an engineer. "You seem confident in this theory," he said carefully. "Confident enough to make you a counteroffer," Riley replied. "Instead of your standard 72-hour death sentence, how about we make this interesting? If I make it through your maze in under 24 hours, you don't just let me go home. You tell me exactly how you acquired me. Help me find whoever sold me to you and provide transport for a return trip." The audacity was breathtaking. "And if you fail? Then you get to watch a human die in your maze, and you can add us to your list of disappointing species." Riley shrugged. "But honestly, if I can't solve this thing, you might want to consider the possibility that your maze really is just a very expensive execution chamber." Vrak looked around the bridge. His crew was waiting for his response, but he could see the doubt in their eyes. This human's analysis had shaken their confidence in their greatest weapon. "Very well," he decided. 24 hours, but you'll be monitored constantly. And if you attempt any trickery." "Trickery?" Riley laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused rather than bitter or fearful. "Commander, I'm a 1.7-meter mammal with no natural weapons about to be dropped into a maze designed to kill beings 3 times my size and 10 times my strength. If I manage to survive through trickery, you should probably be impressed rather than offended." As the guards escorted Riley to the preparation chamber, Vrak found himself looking forward to the hunt for the first time in months. Win or lose, this human was already proving far more entertaining than their previous subjects. "Sub, Commander," he called to Jex 9. "Prepare the full observation suite. If this human is correct about our maze, I want to see exactly how she plans to exploit its weaknesses." "And if she's wrong, my lord?" Vrak claws extended slightly. "Then we'll have the satisfaction of watching her discover that predator or prey. The maze claims everyone in the end." But deep down, he was beginning to suspect that Riley Martinez might be the first being to prove him wrong. And for a hunter who'd grown bored with easy prey, that possibility was almost as thrilling as it was terrifying. The human was about to enter the deadliest maze in known space with nothing but her wits and a basic survival kit. In 18 hours, they would know if humanity deserved to join the ranks of galactic predators or if they were simply another disappointment in a long line of failed prey. Vrak settled back in his command throne and smiled. After 2 years of predictable failures, things were about to become very interesting indeed. The transport pod hissed as it descended through Zelthara Prime's thick atmosphere. Riley pressed her face against the small viewport, studying the swirling canopy of alien jungle that stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere in that green hell was a maze designed to kill her in the most creative ways possible. "Atmospheric composition is acceptable for human physiology," announced the automated system in clipped Korvash standard. "Surface temperature, 42 degrees Celsius. Humidity, 97%. Gravity, 1.3 standard. Perfect. A sauna with extra gravity and probably carnivorous plants. Riley checked her survival kit one more time. Basic water purification tablets, emergency rations for 3 days, a monomolecular cutting tool, standard rope, and a simple communication device that would only activate if she reached the exit. What she didn't have was any kind of weapon, detailed map, or information about the specific hazards waiting below. The Korvash wanted to test her adaptability? Fine. She'd show them what 4 billion years of evolution had taught humanity about staying alive. The pod touched down with a soft thud in a clearing that looked suspiciously convenient. Riley stepped out and immediately felt the oppressive weight of the jungle pressing down on her. The air was thick enough to chew, filled with alien scents that made her nose burn. Strange calls echoed from the canopy above, and something large crashed through the underbrush nearby. "Riley Martinez," Vractol's voice crackled through the comm unit. "You now have 23 hours and 57 minutes to reach the maze exit. The timer starts. Now." The pod immediately lifted off, leaving her alone in the steaming jungle. Riley took a deep breath of the sulphurous air and grinned. Showtime. She spent her first 10 minutes doing something that probably confused the hell out of her alien audience. Absolutely nothing. She sat perfectly still in the clearing, eyes closed, just listening. The jungle had its own rhythm, its own language of sounds that would tell her everything she needed to know. There. The calls from the canopy followed a pattern, predator birds announcing territorial boundaries. The crashing sounds came in regular intervals, probably large herbivores following established paths. And underneath it all, a subtle hum that didn't belong to any biological source. "Interesting construction choice," she murmured, knowing the Korvash were monitoring every word. "You built your maze inside an existing ecosystem instead of replacing it. That suggests you wanted the native predators to be part of the challenge." She opened her eyes and began moving, but not toward any obvious path. Instead, she headed directly for the thickest part of the underbrush, where normal prey would never venture. "What is she doing?" Jex-9 asked from the bridge of the Eternal Fang. Every other species immediately searched for the clearest route through the jungle. Vractol watched the human disappear into vegetation so thick their sensors could barely track her. "She's assuming we want her to take the obvious path. Smart." Riley pushed through thorns that would have shredded normal clothing, grateful for the synthetic fabric of her survival suit. The undergrowth was dense enough to hide her from aerial surveillance, but more importantly, it was dense enough to hide the maze's construction flaws. There, a metal support beam disguised as a fallen log. She knelt beside it and ran her fingers along the surface until she found what she was looking for. A maintenance access panel hidden under synthetic bark. "You magnificent bastards," she whispered. "You built this maze to be maintained, which means there's a service network running underneath all the death traps." The access panel opened with a soft click. Inside was exactly what she'd hoped to find, a maintenance tunnel barely large enough for her to crawl through. The Korvash were massive beings, 3 times her size. Their service tunnels would be designed for robotic maintenance drones, not living creatures. But Riley wasn't massive. She was small, flexible, and perfectly sized to exploit the one flaw the designers never considered. She squeezed into the tunnel and began crawling through absolute darkness, following the barely perceptible current of recycled air that indicated the tunnel system's direction. Behind her, she could hear the frustrated clicks and growls of the Korvash bridge crew as their sensors lost track of her completely. "She's vanished," Thex Prime reported. "All tracking systems show negative contact." "Impossible!" Vractol roared. "Deploy the hunter drones. She can't have simply disappeared. But Riley hadn't disappeared. She'd done something much worse from the Korvash perspective. She'd found their maintenance infrastructure and was using it to bypass the maze entirely. The service tunnel stretched for nearly a kilometer, passing underneath what her mental map suggested were the maze's primary kill zones. Through the thin metal walls, she could hear the sounds of the traps above, the hiss of acid dispensers, the grinding of crushing mechanisms, and the electronic whine of energy weapons charging and discharging. "All of this runs on automated systems," she muttered, pausing at a junction where 3 tunnels met. "Which means there's a central control station somewhere." The airflow was stronger in the left tunnel. Riley followed it, emerging 20 minutes later in what was clearly a monitoring station designed for maintenance robots. Banks of screens showed every section of the maze, complete with trap status indicators and environmental controls. "Well, hello there," she said, settling into a chair obviously designed for beings much larger than herself. "Let's see what you've built, shall we?" The control interface was surprisingly intuitive. Within minutes, she had access to the complete maze schematic, trap locations, and something even more valuable: the failure analysis reports from all 43 previous attempts. "Oh, this is beautiful," Riley laughed, scrolling through the data. "You've been documenting exactly how every species died. You know what that means? You've created the perfect instruction manual for how not to approach your maze." She studied the reports with professional interest. The Trilaxian hunting party had tried to fight their way through the acid gardens and been dissolved. The Zarathi had attempted to outthink the puzzle chambers and triggered a cascade failure that dropped the ceiling on their heads. The Void Stalkers had used their dimensional abilities to bypass the gravity traps, only to emerge directly into a field of disintegration beams. Every failure followed the same pattern: approach obstacle, apply species-specific advantage, die when that advantage became a liability. But what if someone didn't try to overcome the obstacles, Riley mused? What if they just turned them off? She accessed the environmental control system and began making modifications. Not obvious ones that would trigger security protocols, but subtle adjustments that would make the maze significantly less lethal without obviously disabling it. The acid gardens. She reduced the concentration to levels that would sting but not dissolve flesh. The gravity traps? Adjusted to create disorientation rather than crushing force. The disintegration beams? Recalibrated to cause unconsciousness instead of death. "Riley Martinez!" Vrac Toll's voice suddenly boomed through the station's communication system. "What are you doing?" She looked up at the security camera and waved cheerfully. "Oh, hey there! Just making some improvements to your death maze. Hope you don't mind." "You're cheating." "Am I?" Riley pulled up the original rules on the screen. "You said I had to reach the exit within 24 hours using standard survival equipment. You never said I couldn't modify the maze itself. Besides, wouldn't a truly superior predator adapt their hunting ground to match their prey?" The silence from the bridge was deafening. She'd turned their own logic against them. "Also," Riley continued, standing up and gathering her gear, "you might want to consider the psychological impact of this little demonstration. Every species you've tested approached your maze like a challenge to be conquered. But humans? We see a system, and our first instinct is to figure out how to break it, modify it, or use it for something it wasn't designed for." She headed for the exit, but paused at the doorway. "Oh, and one more thing. Your maze isn't impossible to solve the traditional way. Species 44 through 47 would have succeeded if they'd combined the Trilaxian tactical approach with the Zarathi puzzle-solving methodology and the Void Stalker dimensional awareness. You just never tested a species that had all three capabilities. No single species has all three capabilities, Jex-9 protested over the communication. Riley's grin was audible in her voice. Exactly. But humans learn from other species. We study, adapt, and steal the best ideas from everyone we encounter. We don't have natural weapons, so we build them. We don't have armor, so we create it. We don't have innate dimensional abilities, so we develop technology to simulate them. She stepped out of the monitoring station and began walking through the maze proper. With her modifications, it was merely challenging rather than lethal. The acid gardens created an unpleasant obstacle course. The gravity traps provided an interesting workout. The disintegration beams forced her to practice her dodging skills. You see, she continued, as she navigated through a chamber filled with predatory plants that were now merely aggressive rather than carnivorous. Every other species you tested was trying to prove they were apex predators. But humans already know we're not apex predators. We're something much more dangerous. And what's that? Vractol asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. We're the species that turns apex predators into tools, pets, or protein sources. Riley ducked under a swinging blade trap that she'd recalibrated to move at half speed. We domesticated wolves, rode horses into battle, and turned cattle into walking food supplies. We didn't conquer Earth by being the strongest. We conquered it by being the smartest. She reached the final chamber of the maze, a massive arena obviously designed for a climactic battle with some kind of guardian creature. Instead, she found a mechanical construct the size of a building, its weapons powered down, and its threat assessment system displaying her modified biometric data. "Hello, gorgeous," she said, walking up to the dormant war machine. "Let me guess. You were supposed to be the final boss, right? The ultimate predator designed to kill anything that made it this far?" The machine's optical sensors tracked her movement but didn't activate its weapons. According to its programming, she registered as maintenance personnel rather than prey. Riley patted one of its massive legs affectionately. "Sorry, big guy. Nothing personal. But I hacked your threat assessment system about an hour ago. As far as you're concerned, I'm just here to perform routine maintenance." She walked past the confused guardian and pressed her hand against the exit portal. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the facility as the maze registered its first successful completion. "Congratulations," the automated system announced. "Maze completion time, 4 hours, 37 minutes. New record established." Riley stepped through the portal and found herself in another jungle clearing, this one containing a landing pad where a Korvash shuttle was already waiting. Vractol himself emerged from the craft, his massive frame seeming somehow less intimidating than before. "You cheated," he said, though his tone suggested grudging admiration rather than anger. "I adapted," Riley corrected. "There's a difference. Your maze was designed to kill predators who approach problems with brute force and natural advantages. I approached it like a human, by studying the system, finding its weaknesses, and exploiting them. You turned our greatest weapon into a training exercise. I turned your greatest weapon into a learning opportunity." Riley wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked up at the towering alien. "The question is, what are you going to learn from this?" Vractol was quiet for a long moment. "That perhaps we've been hunting the wrong prey. Or maybe," Riley suggested, "you've been thinking about hunting wrong entirely. Every species you've tested tried to beat your maze through individual excellence. But humans? We excel at teamwork, problem-solving, and adaptation. Put a team of humans in there with time to study the system, and we'd probably turn your death trap into an amusement park." The Supreme Commander's laugh was like grinding stone, but there was genuine humor in it now. A terrifying thought. Terrifying for you, maybe. For us, it's Tuesday. Riley climbed into the shuttle and settled into a seat designed for beings 3 times her size. So, about that deal. I completed your maze in under 24 hours, which means you owe me some information about how I ended up here. As the shuttle lifted off from Zelthara Prime, Vraktol found himself looking forward to the conversation ahead. For the first time in years, he'd encountered a species that might actually prove worthy of respect, rather than simple predation. And Riley Martinez, the small human who'd turned his perfect killing machine into a logic puzzle, was already planning how to use that respect to ensure her species never ended up in another alien maze again. The hunt was over. But for both species, the real learning was just beginning.